We've been talking about the essence and process of artistic creation, and it's kind of a mysterious subject. If someone were to ask me, "Hey, Wang Defeng, are you qualified to talk about the essence and process of artistic creation? You're not an artist, and you haven't proven that you're into artistic creation. How do you even know about this stuff? Have you written a novel? Composed a symphony?" If someone said that to me, I'd feel pretty awkward, right? You're not the right person to talk about it. So, my answer to that person would be, well, even if you're an artist, I'm telling you, you're not the right person to talk about it either. Just because you've made some art and got the artist label doesn't mean you can explain the essence and process of artistic creation. Why? The thing is, artists aren't any more of an authority on this matter than we are. When it comes to the philosophy of art, we're discussing the theory of the essence and process of artistic creation. For artists, every creation they make is a practical way to answer the question, what's the essence of artistic creation? That's the question they have to tackle with each new creation. Does that make sense to you? Just because they rocked it with their last piece doesn't guarantee that their next one will be a hit. We call somebody a poet because they've been successful in the past, but that doesn't mean their next work is definitely going to be a dope poem. Every time they write a poem, they've still got to figure out the answer to the question, what's the essence of artistic creation? For them, it's a practical thing, and for us, talking about art philosophy, it's a theoretical thing. Neither of us has the final say on it. Oh man, you know about the story of Sisyphus in Western mythology, right? He was punished for constantly pushing a huge rock up a hill, only for it to roll back down every time he got it to the top. It's like the ultimate never-ending chore. The artist is in a similar boat, like Sisyphus. Think about it, they manage to create something amazing one time, and then the next time, it's like starting all over again. Success in one project doesn't guarantee the next, it's an ongoing battle for true artistic creation. What's next? Suddenly, it's all about churning out work, and the real artistry is lost. For sure, there are artists like that. Ever thought about it? Take, for example, the novels of Gene Yong. At first, they're groundbreaking, but later on, it feels like repetition. Many of the subsequent novels seem like they're just churned out, with the real creativity fading away. Sure, he's super productive, but what's being produced? It's more like skilled craftsmanship, not genuine artistic expression. But why do we spend so much time emphasizing and discussing the essence of artistic creation? Because when we compare artistic creation with craftsmanship, we naturally find the essential difference between the two. When a craftsman is making his craft, he already knows exactly what he's trying to make. We often call these folks artists or label their work as artistic, right? Take teapots, for example. In Yixing, there are these pottery pros who are total experts at making them. So, are these people artists or craftsmen? They're definitely craftsmen. Why? Well, right from the start of the production process, they already know what they're going to make, like a teapot. Even before they start making it, they've got a clear picture of what the finished product will look like. But when it comes to artistic creation, it's a whole different story. A real artist doesn't know what they've created until the entire creative process is done. As long as they're in the middle of creating, they have no clue what they're going to come up with. It's not something they can figure out in advance. And that's how we distinguish between artistic creation and craftsmanship. I don't know if I've mentioned it here before, maybe I've talked about that Tolstoy story. What was he working on? Anna Karenina, right? So one day, Tolstoy's family heard loud crying coming from his study, which freaked them out, and they all went in to ask, "What's wrong? What's going on?" Tolstoy said, "Anna's dead." "How did she die?" She killed herself by throwing herself under a train. Then the family tried to convince him, if you're so upset, don't let her die. But Tolstoy said, I know. I've already figured out that she's definitely going to die, and it's definitely going to be suicide, and definitely by throwing herself under a train. What's this story all about? Well, it shows the big difference between making art and making something practical. Creating a novel is all about exploring, not having everything planned out in advance. If we see the process of writing literary novels like this, we're not getting the real deal. It's super important. Even though when we finally read the book, we might think the story's been cleverly crafted. Like, take Dream of the Red Chamber for example. When we read Dream of the Red Chamber 180th century CE, these days, we totally see how well-planned and tightly woven the whole thing is. It's like someone put it, the story is as twisty and turny as a long snake, stretching for miles and with everything fitting together from start to finish. And you know what's crazy? All the clues and hints are carefully planted right from the get-go. Take the main characters, the 12 ladies of Jinling, for example. You can already see their fates spelled out in the 5th chapter. When Jia Baoyu has that trippy dream in the fantasy world, there's this massive cabinet in the grand hall, and inside, there are these drawers. When he pulls them open, ta-da! There are these registers with all the details about the destiny of all those women of Jinling, mapping out their paths and where they end up. And of course, when Jia Baoyu first checks out the registers, he's kinda clueless and doesn't fully get it, right? It's only towards the end of the story, when he revisits the fantasy world, that it all clicks and he remembers everything. It's like, dang, when we read Dream of the Red Chamber, it's clear that Cao Xueqin, 18th century CE, really put a ton of thought into each and every character. The connections between the characters, and what happens to each one, it wasn't some fluke. In the first chapter of the novel, it goes into how Mr. Cao crafted it in his studio Dao Hongshuan. It says it took him a tough and crazy 10 years, with a decade of writing and 5 rounds of rewrites, all laid out in the first chapter. He kept tinkering with it, making 5 big changes over 10 years. At the end, it feels like he totally planned and mapped it all out in advance. But really, the whole creative process was a big old journey of discovery. So, we gotta look at artistic creation as this ongoing process of exploration and discovery, not just some pre-planned thing where once you've got the design down, you just churn out the finished product. That's not how art gets made. So, there's this book that got me thinking. It's about a kid who got so upset with his dad for wrongly accusing and punishing him that he started to imagine revenge. He was so sad and felt like he couldn't talk to his dad about it, so he hid and cried under his bed covers. But then he realized that crying alone wouldn't solve anything. After a while, he decided he wanted to get back at his dad, so he came up with a plan. He thought, my dad goes down the stairs every morning. I'll tie a thin rope on the stairs. When he walks down, he'll trip and fall. But when he tried it out, he actually ended up getting badly injured himself. He knew he had to think of a different way to deal with the situation. So, he had another idea. This time, he thought, I don't want to hurt my dad. I'd rather suffer myself. In his imagination, he bought rat poison and planned to take it to make his dad feel guilty. He even imagined his parents finding him dead when they got home. But then he realized that this wouldn't be fair to his dad either. He understood that he couldn't punish his father this way and put him through lifelong pain. He couldn't imagine leaving his father so heartbroken. So, this attempt also failed. However, through his failed attempts, he began to understand his feelings. He realized that, deep down, he loved his dad. This understanding led him to think of a different approach. I won't go into details about what he thought of this time, but it was a turning point for him. The next day, he wrote down his new idea, and it turned into a small story. Even though he was just a kid, he showed the story to his classmates, and they were all deeply moved. His teacher also saw it and was touched. This was his first attempt at creating something meaningful. Through trial and error, he discovered the true nature of the bond between him and his father. His story made others understand and feel the emotions of a father-son relationship in a different way. The process of trial and exploration in this story is like the journey of creation, isn't it? By the end, he realized that behind his anger was a deep love for his father, and this love reached out and touched others through his story. Artistic creation becomes a way to express emotions and understand them. Only by creating can we truly understand the nature of human emotions. And this, my friends, is the real motivation behind every artist's work. He's not like, I'm gonna be a famous novelist or poet. That's not his main motivation. Instead, he's driven by this unstoppable need to dig deep into the emotions bubbling up inside, to really get to the heart of what they're all about. That's what really fuels his creativity. Because, you can't fully understand those emotions without going through the creative process. Most of us don't do that. We feel something, then we just move on and forget about it. But an artist? They grab onto that emotion and try to figure it out. And the only way to truly understand it is by creating something from it. So what's the real deal with creation? It's all about exploring and discovering. We choose to express those raw emotions through poetry or music because that's how we can really uncover their true nature. We're here to talk about real art, That's what artistic creation is all about. And that's why I want to share this quote from John Dewey's book, Art as Experience. Check out page 137. Dewey, an American philosopher, wrote a bunch of stuff, including stuff about art. In 1934, he wrote this book, Art as Experience, which became a classic in the art world. In this book, Dewey says, some people, especially those who don't know much, think only scientists do experiments. But here's the thing, one of the key things about being an artist is that they're natural-born experimenters. Without that, they'd just be like any old scholar. Artists have to be experimenters because they gotta express their own unique experiences using the usual tools and materials. This thing can't be solved once and for all, because artists deal with it every time they create something new. If not, they'd just be repeating themselves and lose their artistic spark. It's because artists are all about experimenting that they can come up with new experiences and show us new sides to things we thought we knew. Here Dewey talks about pioneering new experiences. Humans get to know themselves through thinking and philosophy, and they find out about themselves through art. That's why both philosophy and art are in the truth zone. When artists create their works, it's a kind of personal reflection, and that's just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to understanding ourselves. If philosophy is all about thinking deeply and systematically about life, then art is a way to visually and/or audially see ourselves. So, making art becomes this whole exploration thing, and Dewey calls it pioneering new experiences. Great art pieces give us fresh insights into our lives. If we take a closer look at this understanding, we're really getting to the heart of our life experiences. It's about uncovering the true emotions we feel in life. Remember that emotion between a dad and his kiddo I mentioned before? What's the real deal there? Through a kid's creation, at least a piece of it gets revealed. So, at this point, we really need to separate artistic creation from just crafting stuff. We gotta understand that creating art is basically a big discovery process. That's why we say true art only knows what it is when it's all done. That's the deal for an artist. If the whole creating thing isn't wrapped up, the artist won't ever know what they're making. The emotions we go through are full of different flavors and depths. The deeper the emotion, the more it needs to be brought out through some intense art making. We can't just slap a label on our emotions. One's sad, the other one's happy, right? Nah, art doesn't work like that. It's easy for us to put our emotions into categories, but just slapping a label on them doesn't get to the true heart of those feelings. So, each emotion that pushes an artist to create is really personal. It's not something that can be explained in a general way. It has to come out layer by layer through the process of making art. You know, when we think about Dai Wangshu, died 1950, the Rain Lane poet, his poem Rain Lane really made a big splash, and that's why he got labeled as the Rain Lane poet. It's a really well-written piece. He dug deep into the experiences of the intellectuals of his time in China, but he did it in a super personal way. You know that feeling of being lost and not knowing where to go? Or that deep sadness and gloominess? Yeah, those are all super personal. Dai Wangshu had to use his poem to bring all of that out. We tend to just slap labels like anger or sadness on our emotions, but it's pointless. When we really want to get to the core of those deeply personal feelings, there's only one way to do it: by creating. That's when art comes into play. But, hey, we can't do it on our own. We need existing works of art to lead the way. And that's how we explain what it really means to create art.